Have you ever stumbled upon something so strange it left you questioning reality? From ancient footprints that shouldn't exist to mysterious artifacts no one can explain, today's video is full of questions. Get ready to dive into the weird and wonderful as we explore some of the most bizarre finds that continue to baffle experts today. The other Machu Picchu. While Machu Picchu often steals the spotlight in Peru, have you ever heard of Huacra Pucara, or the Horned Fortress, hidden deep within the Peruvian Andes? What do you think a place called the Horned Fortress looks like? You're probably picturing it already. This ancient fortress has two massive rock formations that stick out of the ground resembling horns. It looks like the mountain the rock formation is resting on is wearing a helmet ready for combat. And it's a good thing because this place saw its fair share of battles. Huacra Pucara rests 14,100 feet above sea level. The formation consists of a citadel in the middle of a rocky spur where there are two groups of enclosures separated by a large central space. This is surrounded by 8 artificial terraces with retaining walls that follow the landscape and a series of enclosures on the east and western end. But it's not just the funky rocks that make this place special. Long before the Incas took over, different ethnic groups called this place home, like the Kanchi people. They lived in the area and built up the site as a fortified town to protect their land. This was around 1000 BC, so Huacra Pucara has seen a lot of action over the centuries. One of the coolest things about Huacra Pucara is its role as a ceremonial center. The Kanchi people were deeply spiritual, and they believed in a god called Texi Pachacamac Huiracocha, the creator of the world. It was built to commemorate and remember the creator. They made offerings to the sun, moon, and stars right there at Huacra Pucara. They even sacrificed llamas and alpacas. In the Inca era, Huacra Pucara became an important site for astronomy. They weren't just warriors and builders, they were stargazers too. Huayna Capac, an Inca emperor, even converted the place into an observation center. There is also some epic drama attached to Huacra Pucara. One legend involves a local hero named Tito Cosnipa, who wasn't thrilled about paying taxes to the Inca. Apparently, Capac wanted tribute in the form of textiles for his soldiers, but Tito wasn't having it. He led a rebellion against the Inca, which led to a showdown on the mountain. Spoiler alert, the Inca won. They cut off the Kanchi people's water supply, and Tito was forced to surrender after being held up in Huacra Pucara for a month. But the Inca didn't execute Tito and his followers. Instead, they cut off their ears as punishment and then forced them to join the Inca army. They all went on to fight in battles in Ecuador. And guess what? They won those battles. I wonder how they felt about winning battles for their enemies. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Mars crystals. Would you rather have a diamond ring, a gold necklace, or crystals from another planet? NASA's Curiosity rover just made an accidental but incredible discovery on Mars: ultra-rare crystals. Who knows? Maybe in a few years we will be paying big bucks to wear genuine Mars crystal jewelry. So how did it happen? Curiosity rover was rolling around the Geddes Vallis area, which is a steep slope in Gale Crater, when it ran over a rock. But this was no ordinary Martian rock. When Curiosity crushed it, the rock cracked open, revealing bright yellow crystals made of pure sulfur inside. The rover found something that had never been seen before on Mars. But why is sulfur so exciting? Sulfur is an element that has been detected on Mars before, but it was always mixed with other elements and compounds called sulfates. This time, however, the rover discovered pure sulfur, which had scientists jumping out of their seats. Imagine finding a golden nugget where you expected nothing but dirt. That's how rare this find is. As one of the scientists put it shouldn't be there, so now we have to explain it. Looks like NASA has their work cut out for them. When Curiosity drilled into nearby rocks, it confirmed the presence of these sulfur crystals. They were too delicate for the rover to pick up, but the photos alone weren't enough to blow everyone's minds. The surrounding area was littered with similar geodes, so it's likely that there is more sulfur hidden in the region. This discovery has left scientists buzzing with questions. How did pure sulfur end up inside rocks on the surface of Mars? And why this particular spot? It's like stumbling upon an oasis in the middle of a desert, which is exactly how the scientists described it. And just when you thought Mars couldn't get any cooler, Curiosity's adventures have already led to several other interesting finds. Earlier this year, the rover snapped photos of waves in an ancient lake bed, hinting that water once flowed there millions of years ago. It even discovered rocks that suggest Mars had an oxygen-rich atmosphere at some point in the past. So who knows what other surprises Mars has in store? Is there an advanced civilization of aliens living underground too? Thanks to Curiosity's clumsy tire, we've now got a whole new Martian mystery on our hands. The next step? More exploration, of course. The Isle of Pines Mounds. The Isle of Pines in New Caledonia might look like a tropical paradise, but there is a bizarre mystery hidden beneath its grassy surface. Over 400 strange mound-like structures known as tumuli dot the island, and at first glance they seem pretty ordinary, just piles of soil. But that's not the case at all. When people started poking around in 1959, they found something that has left archaeologists scratching their heads for decades. So what exactly are these tumuli hiding? Deep inside these mounds lies a massive, high-quality concrete block. That's right, there is concrete down there that's thousands of years old, which is shocking because concrete wasn't supposed to exist until much later in history. Some snail shells stuck to these blocks were carbon dated to be 10,000 to 12,000 years old. That's way before humans ever had any kind of technology like concrete in the South Pacific. So who or what made these mounds? It gets even weirder. Each concrete block has a perfectly smooth shaft running down the middle, and at the bottom of that shaft, a giant cone-shaped metal object made of iron, surrounded by iron nuggets. What in the world is that thing doing there? No one really knows, but it's definitely not just random iron junk. Some people have speculated about everything from ancient alien visitors to lost civilizations like Atlantis, of course. Others, however, have tried to explain it away with slightly less exciting theories. In 1959, the first proper excavation happened almost by accident when locals started digging into a tumulus for road repairs. They soon hit a massive chunk of concrete that was so tough even dynamite couldn't break it. Archaeologist Luc Chevalier swooped in to investigate and started digging up one of the mounds. But when they uncovered the mysterious metal object, the excavation site started to collapse, and the whole thing had to be abandoned. Chevalier published his findings a few years later, and everyone was left with more questions than answers. Now let's talk theories. In the beginning, some researchers thought these mounds were made by giant birds. The idea was that some long-extinct megapode birds built these massive mounds to hatch their eggs, and over time, their bird poop solidified into concrete. Well, unsurprisingly, this idea turned out to be completely wrong. By 2016, a group of paleozoologists shot down the bird theory, showing that the birds in question weren't even capable of building something like this. So if it wasn't bird poop, what was it? In the absence of a better explanation, some experts tried to argue that the tumuli were just burial mounds. But there's a problem. No bones have ever been found inside them. Not a single one. So what were these people supposedly burying? That theory, like the others, didn't hold up. Fast forward to 2017, and French archaeologist Louis Lagarde dropped another bombshell. He suggested that these mounds weren't made by birds or weather patterns, but by people. But then, in the same breath, Lagarde dismissed all the cool stuff inside the mounds. The concrete, the iron cone, the circular shaft, as if it didn't exist. That left everyone more confused than ever. I mean, how can you explain the mounds without acknowledging what's actually inside of them? To this day, no one has a solid answer to explain these bizarre mounds. Why build over 400 of them and then vanish without leaving a trace? No tools, no pottery, no bones, just these mysterious mounds and their strange contents. The Starving of Sakara. The Starving of Sakara sculpture is going to have you hungry for answers. It's an ancient Egyptian sculpture, but nobody is sure when it was made or why. It's also a mystery as to how it ended up in its current location at Montreal's Concordia University. So what exactly is this thing? The sculpture is made from limestone. It stands about 26 inches tall and weighs a whopping 176 pounds. This sculpture depicts two seated figures, possibly a male and a female, with elongated heads and super thin limbs, like they've been on some kind of ancient diet. One of the figures might be holding a child, but again, no one can say for certain. There are some faded pigments on the statue, which means it was once painted, and there's even some mysterious writing at the base. The catch is that no one knows what language it's in. How frustrating is that? The sculpture sort of resembles the bodies at Pompeii, frozen in time. Could it be that these figures unexpectedly became victims of some ancient disaster, preserving their bodies and then morphed into some morbid art installation? I mean, it's not likely given their small stature, but until the truth is revealed, it can't be ruled out. For all anyone knows, these could be remnants of a lost race of mini-humans. The story of this statue in modern times is just as strange. It was part of the collection of Vincent and Olga Diniakopoulos, a couple who loved collecting ancient Egyptian, Greek, and Roman artifacts. How they got their hands on the starving of Sakara is anyone's guess, kind of like the statue itself. They brought the statue to Montreal in the 1950s and displayed it in their family gallery, but after Vincent's death in 1967, the statue was boxed up and shoved into their basement, where it stayed hidden for decades. It wasn't until 1999, when Olga asked Concordia University to help manage the family's massive collection, that the starving of Sakara saw the light of day again. The statue was in pieces at this point, so Concordia helped put it back together. Then came the million-dollar question: what is this thing? Researchers from all over the world were contacted. Cambridge, the British Museum, even the Israel Museum, but no one could figure it out. Some experts think it dates back to Egypt's pre-dynastic period and might represent conquered people, possibly the Nubians. Others believe it could be connected to the time when the Jews were exiled from Egypt. And of course, there's always that one person in the back of the room who says maybe it's a fake. With no other artifacts quite like it, some experts have wondered if it's too unique to be real. But the Diniakopoulos family had the statue legally exported during a time when the art market was like the Wild West, so most scholars lean toward it being genuine. Even though experts at Concordia University and other places have poked and prodded at the starving of Sakara, its origins are still wrapped in mystery. And now for a quick break, but first I want to give a big shout out to Brittany Kelly and Melissa Mohammed for supporting this channel. Thank you so much! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. Mysterious holes. Close your eyes and picture towering rock cliffs filled with strange holes and chambers like a giant went poking their finger around for fun. The whole place looks as if rock-munching termites had a field day. This is a mysterious site in the heart of Madagascar called Teniki, and it has puzzled archaeologists for decades. According to researchers, the holes were carved by ancient people about 1,000 years ago. But these aren't your average caves. They have an eerie connection to one of the world's oldest religions, Zoroastrianism. These holes might be linked to a religion that is over 3,000 years old. The rock cliffs at Teniki are tough to get to. Archaeologists have to hike 12 miles across rugged terrain just to reach the site, and that's no easy task. I mean, when's the last time you went on a hike that long, just to do more work once you reach the end of it? Probably never. The location of the site may be part of the reason why not many teams have studied the area. For over 1,000 years, people have known about these cliffs, but the research has been pretty limited. Back in the early 1900s, a couple of French naturalists had a theory that the rock carvings were made by Portuguese sailors stranded on Madagascar in the 16th century. They believed the sailors carved these shelters while trying to find a way off the island. That's why the place earned the nickname Grotte de Português, or Cave of the Portuguese. But by the 1960s, archaeologists debunked this theory because the carvings were way too complex to have been done by a bunch of shipwrecked sailors. So, who did carve these cliffs? That's where things get even more interesting. In 2019, researchers used high-tech satellite images and discovered that the site was much bigger than anyone thought. They found terraces, stone basins, and tons of other structures that had been missed before. With this new information, archaeologist and professor Guido Schreurs and his team went back to the site to investigate. During their excavation, they found over 74 acres, which is like 30 football fields, I think, of man-made terraces, circular and rectangular stone structures, and even ceramic shards. Some of these ceramics were traced back to Southeast Asia and China, suggesting that the people who lived here were connected to the Indian Ocean trade network. This ruled out the Portuguese sailor theory since the site was occupied long before they arrived. So the mystery deepened. Who were these people? Schurz began to think outside the box. He noticed similarities between the stone niches at Teniki and others found in Iran, particularly in areas connected to the ancient Zoroastrian religion. Zoroastrians were known for their unique funeral practices. They would leave bodies in stone niches to decompose naturally before collecting the bones and placing them in smaller chambers. Could it be that Zoroastrians somehow made their way to Madagascar? It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. In the first millennium, Persian port towns were major hubs for trade across the Indian Ocean, reaching as far as China and East Africa. Ships from these regions could have easily brought Zoroastrians to Madagascar. The stylistic similarities between the stone structures at Teniki and those used for Zoroastrian rituals seems to be pretty compelling evidence. However, there's a catch. No bones have been found at the site. If this place was used for Zoroastrian funeral rites, where are the remains? It's possible that bones were removed over the years by people living in the area, so the theory isn't completely off the table just yet. The Zoroastrian connection to Teniki is still just a hypothesis, but it's a fascinating one. Perus Circular Plaza. In February 2024, researchers in Peru stumbled upon this ancient structure in the Cajamarca Valley at the Kayak Puma archaeological site. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's about 10,000 feet above sea level. This place was built around 4,750 years ago, dating back to a time when humans were just starting to experiment with farming and settling down, according to mainstream science. So what exactly is this stone circle? Well, it's a 60-foot wide circular plaza made up of two concentric walls, created by placing large stones vertically into the ground. These megalithic stones aren't shaped or polished, they are just raw rock standing tall and proud. The circle was built by a community of people who were likely still hunting and gathering, but beginning to figure out how to grow their own food. Think of this monument like Stonehenge's long-lost cousin, but perched high in the Andes. It was constructed 100 years before the Great Pyramids and around the same time as Stonehenge. Archaeologists believe it was likely used for ceremonial purposes. Why? Well, no everyday items or signs of regular life were found nearby. This wasn't some ancient stone patio where people hung out for lunch breaks. It was likely a sacred place where people gathered for important rituals or festivals. But why would a small, relatively mobile group of people go through the trouble of building something so monumental? That's one of the big questions. Jason Toohey, the archaeologist leading this study, has a few theories. He thinks the stone circle might have been built to bring people together. It was either constructed under the leadership of a powerful individual or as a collective project to make a lasting mark on their land. Either way, it's clear that this was a huge effort. The stone circle is part of a broader trend of ancient societies building massive structures, way bigger than they needed to be. Whether it's the pyramids of Egypt, Stonehenge in England, or Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, these monuments often had more meaning than just being cool to look at. They symbolized a shift in society. People were moving from small groups to larger, more complex social structures, and these monuments were physical markers of that change. Researchers are just scratching the surface of what this site might reveal. They plan to use remote sensing technology to see if there are more hidden treasures buried nearby. Who knows what else might be waiting to be discovered? For now, this mysterious stone circle stands as one of the earliest examples of monumental architecture in the Americas. Headless skeletons. Try not to lose your head over this next discovery. In Slovakia, something truly wild was found in the ancient settlement of Brable, a bunch of headless skeletons. That's right, 38 skeletons were all missing their heads, except for one small child. They were uncovered by a team of archaeologists in a ditch surrounding the site. The team, led by archaeologists from Kiel University and the Slovak Academy of Sciences, made this eerie discovery while exploring the ancient settlement. The site dates back to the early Neolithic period, around 7,000 years ago. Vrable was one of the biggest settlements in Central Europe at the time, and it belonged to the linear pottery culture, or the LBK. This place once had over 300 houses, and some areas were even protected by ditches and palisades. While it's unclear if these barriers were meant for defense, they did mark off boundaries, which clearly didn't stop this creepy graveyard from forming. So what's up with all the headless bodies? That's the big mystery. The skeletons were found all jumbled together, some lying face down, some curled up, and others with their limbs all over the place. It's almost like they were just tossed into the ditch. But why were they missing their heads? Were they decapitated in some gruesome ritual? Did something dark and mysterious happen here? The archaeologists have some theories. They are wondering if these people were part of some ancient massacre, or if there was a tradition involving head removal after death. Sounds like the beginning of a horror movie. But here's the twist. Some of the skeletons still had their first cervical vertebra, aka the bone connecting the skull to the spine. So what does that mean? Well, it means their heads weren't hacked off in a violent way, so what the heck happened? It's possible the heads were carefully removed later, which raises more questions than answers. Why would someone go to the trouble of taking the heads off so precisely? Researchers are investigating further to figure out who these people were, whether they were locals or if they came from other places. They think it's possible they could have been related, but until more tests are done, they can't be sure. The team is using advanced techniques like DNA analysis and radiocarbon dating to get to the bottom of it. Could they have been victims of war or even a part of some strange headhunting practice? Only time and a lot of digging will tell. The indecipherable Juda rock. Deep in the misty mountains of North Carolina, a sacred rock holds a 1,000-year-old secret. Known as Juda rock, this ancient artifact is central to Cherokee folklore and legend. But what exactly does it represent? And why is it so important to the Cherokee? Listen to this and let me know what you think in the comments below. This giant rock has been giving people headaches for centuries. Why? Because it's covered in ancient carvings that nobody can figure out. This mysterious boulder in Jackson County has over 1,500 strange symbols scratched into its surface. Some people think it's a map, others say it's a record of an ancient battle, and a few believe it is nothing more than super old graffiti. But one thing's for sure, there are a lot of wild theories about this thing, and none of them have cracked the case. For the Cherokee people, Juda rock is more than just a rock. It is sacred, tied to their stories and legends. According to their folklore, a giant named Juda once roamed the mountains. He was no ordinary giant, though. He had slanted eyes, 7 fingers, and the ability to fly or teleport from one mountaintop to another. Legend has it that Juda left his mark on the rock as a warning. Those carvings, especially the claw-like handprints, were his territorial marker. Cross that line and you were in big trouble. You'd be wandering into his hunting grounds. The rock itself is huge, about 240 square feet, and covered in tightly packed carvings of stick figures, handprints, cup marks, and other mysterious shapes. Archaeologists believe the carvings date back to between 2000 and 3000 BC. However, they haven't found any other stones in the area with similar markings, making this one-of-a-kind discovery even more puzzling. Were these symbols some kind of ancient message, or were they just decorative? The Cherokee have their own ideas, of course, with some believing the carvings represent a peace treaty between their tribe and the Catawba people. Others say it could have been a game law or a map of an important battle. But that hasn't stopped UFO enthusiasts and ghost hunters from coming up with their own theories. Rumors swirl about strange noises and UFO sightings around Juda rock at night. Maybe it's just the wind, or maybe it's something else. Recent scientific efforts using lasers to scan the rock have created a detailed view of the carvings, but the rock is slowly eroding due to weather. This means that the mysterious symbols may soon disappear entirely, and with them, the chance of ever truly understanding the story they are trying to tell. To add even more confusion, some rocks in Scotland have carvings eerily similar to those on Juda rock. But how did two places, oceans apart, end up with the same designs? Nobody knows, and that's just another layer of mystery to this already puzzling ancient site. The haunting faces of Lipensky Vir. Haunting faces carved into rocks were unearthed at Lipensky Vir, Siberia's first city. Dating back around 8,000 years, these mysterious sculptures depict fish-like creatures with large round eyes and sorrowful mouths. The identity of their creators and the purpose behind these peculiar statues remain a mystery to experts. Lipensky Vir was a settlement along the Danube River, inhabited for over 12,000 years by a blend of Near Eastern farmers and local hunters and gatherers. Its exceptional preservation and ancient artifacts make it an archaeologist's paradise. Some even consider it Europe's first city due to its organized, permanent dwellings. The eerie statues discovered there are among the oldest of their size ever found, carved from round sandstone cobbles from the riverbanks. Their haunting, fish-like faces seem to gaze directly into the soul. While some archaeologists speculate these carvings represent river gods, others say they might be tributes to the deceased. Regardless, these sculptures offer a tangible connection to one of Europe's earliest cultures, even if their meaning remains elusive. Lipensky Vir marks a pivotal moment in human history as people transitioned from hunting and gathering to farming. However, its multicultural nature complicates our understanding of its inhabitants' beliefs and motivations. Did they pray to the river that sustained their lives, or were these statues created to honor their ancestors? Researchers aren't sure, but what do you think? Red supermassive black hole. Imagine a cosmic monster lurking in the shadows of the universe, 40 million times more massive than our sun. Are we safe? In 2024, astronomers hit the jackpot with an exciting discovery: a bright red supermassive black hole. But this isn't just any black hole. It's around 40 million times bigger than our sun. That's like comparing a tiny ant to a gigantic elephant. It's so massive that it could swallow our entire solar system. So what's the deal with this cosmic giant? The black hole is a staggering 12.9 billion light-years away from Earth, and it's rapidly growing. This particular black hole is glowing red because of something called a quasar. Let me paint a picture for you. When a black hole sucks in nearby material, it creates an incredibly bright disk of matter that heats up so much it starts glowing, giving off that vibrant reddish hue. In fact, this black hole's quasar is so powerful, it's outshining all the stars around it. Astronomers had long predicted that such a black hole could exist, but finding one was another story. This discovery is huge because it acts like a time capsule, giving scientists clues about the universe's early days when it was just 700 million years old. Back then, it was only the size of a modern star cluster. This new find helps researchers model how current black holes might evolve based on this ancient giant's movements. And hey, that research will come in handy when, in the future, we find ourselves staring down the barrel of one of these cosmic beasts. The giant footprint of South Africa. In northeastern South Africa, near Umkuluzi, there is a huge, mysterious footprint carved into granite. It's about 4 feet long and looks suspiciously like a giant's footprint. But before we start imagining colossal barefoot giants strolling through South Africa, let's dive into the mystery. A researcher named Michael Tellinger brought attention to this footprint in 2012. He suggested it could be evidence of ancient giants. Yes, giants like the ones from old legends and the Bible. These Nephilim-like figures are often tied to stories of pre-flood times. But before you get too excited, geologists are quick to throw some cold water on the flames of this idea. Here's why. Granite isn't the soft, muddy ground you'd expect for making footprints. In fact, granite is an igneous rock, meaning it forms deep underground when magma cools and solidifies. That process happens at scorching temperatures around 1,472 degrees Fahrenheit. So, unless these giants had fireproof feet, walking on molten magma seems unlikely. But what about this footprint? Well, granite often forms strange shapes when it weathers, meaning the forces of nature like wind and water erode it over time. Geologists point to simpler rock formations in places like South Australia and Sardinia, where erosion has created shapes that look oddly familiar to us. Like faces, or in this case, a giant foot. The footprint at Mpuluzi might just be one of these natural wonders. But on the other hand, it could be something more extraordinary. Let's imagine for a moment that this print is the real deal. It's roughly 4 times the size of an average adult footprint, meaning that whatever made this foot shape would be somewhere around 23 feet tall. This giant would have weighed about 6 tons, although it's hard to explain how something of this stature would have survived in our gravity. I mean, what did they eat? They must have been snacking 24/7, and that still probably wasn't enough. But let's bring things back to reality for a moment. If it really is a footprint, where are the rest of the tracks? That's a good question. If a giant left a footprint, wouldn't there be more? Geologists argue that isolated footprints are rare to identify, and without a trail, it's hard to claim this is anything more than a weathered rock. Plus, the foot shape is found on a vertical wall, which would mean this giant would have to walk up a wall of molten magma, so not exactly easy, even for a giant.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Faces in the desert. Something new has just been discovered. Just earlier this year, 2022 in case you're in the future, a Neolithic complex dating back 9,000 years was uncovered in the desert of Jordan, the same country as the ancient city of Petra. The find was recorded by a team of French and Jordanian archaeologists consisting of strange stone carvings. The thing about the complex is that it appears to have been used as some kind of ritual installation. This isn't an ancient city or even a settlement, but an entire complex dedicated to a ritual that archaeologists know nothing about. The complex itself is in ruins, with not much left except some stone walls and heaps of bizarre statues carved with unusual, almost alien-like faces. Nearby, archaeologists found huge stone traps called desert kites, inventions of ancient hunters for catching animals like gazelles. They built stone walls to funnel animals into traps, slaying as many of them at one time as possible. Additionally, the researchers found a handful of campsites in the area, where the hunters had lived in semi-subterranean huts. It's all a little confusing, but archaeologists have been able to put most of the pieces together. The campsites were used as living areas for the hunters while they corralled as many animals as they could using their traps. Then they gathered in the ritual complex to perform some kind of ceremony, but the details of this ceremony are elusive. If it's not clearly drawn on a tablet found right there explaining it all, it's hard to say for sure, but it almost definitely had something to do with the hunt and capture of animals. But we don't know if there were sacrifices involved or if the ancient hunters were conducting acts of worship. We also don't know why they carved dozens of statues with seemingly inhuman faces. Ancient runes. Recent excavations done by researchers with the Norwegian Institute for Cultural Heritage Research discovered an object of great mystery. The team was investigating an archaeological site near Oslo, which is a medieval park that hasn't been inhabited since the 13th century. They pulled from the dirt a wooden object not even 1 foot in length. Yet the small object seems to be of some great importance and is carved with strange runes. Professor of runology Crystal Zilmer decoded the runes and found they translate directly to a person's name. Whoever made the inscription was named Asbjorn, a pretty common name for men back in the days of the medieval Norse. What the object is has proved a little more difficult to figure out. It doesn't seem to have been used for any obvious purpose. It wasn't a tool, it had no religious value. The best archaeologists have been able to come up with is that it was used as a label. It may have been attached to something to indicate that something was Asbjorn's property. In other words, it was a wooden tag that would have been attached to a specific item so that everyone knew it belonged to Asbjorn. It's like one of those tags you attach to your luggage at the airport with your name and phone number, except over 700 years ago in an ancient Norwegian city. Discoveries like this show that though society has evolved and changed over time, there are some simple human behaviors that have remained the same. For example, labeling your items. Mysterious underground tunnel. When a team of construction workers were busy digging a hole for a sewage pipe near Kolkata, India, they discovered the entrance to an old, mysterious underground tunnel. The tunnel is also near an ancient fort, as well as inside the old capital of the Eastern Ganja dynasty. The city is called Cuttack and is over 1,000 years old. Cuttack is rich in history, so it's no surprise that there are hidden structures beneath the modern city streets. It is unclear what this tunnel was once used for, but inside researchers did find brick constructs and an arch. It could have been an ancient housing structure buried over the centuries, or some kind of secret escape passage. It's totally up in the air right now, as the structure is located 12 feet beneath the street and isn't exactly easy to investigate. Additionally, construction had to move on, and so much of whatever archaeologists could have found was quickly covered over. But what was the Ganja dynasty? The Ganja appeared around the 11th century and ruled over the modern state of Odisha and all the way into West Bengal. They built the great Konark Sun Temple, dedicated to the sun god Surya. This is the oldest place in all of India where people first gathered together to literally worship the sun. And it wasn't even that long ago, only about 700 years. The dynasty ended when King Bhanudeva IV was killed in 1434. Egyptian time capsule. Archaeologists in Egypt discovered something almost unbelievable. They uncovered over 18,000 tablets, which give an unparalleled insight into the lives of ordinary citizens living in this ancient civilization. Basically, archaeologists found snapshots of their lives preserved in stone, what you might think of as ancient Egyptian Instagram stories. Each tablet is mundane by itself, but when put together, they offer a glimpse into the past. The discovery was made in the town of Athribis and consists of thousands of pieces of pottery called ostraka. These pieces had been used by the ancient Egyptians as notepads. Imagine people breaking apart pots and using the shards to write things like grocery lists, small stories, and even private letters. The pieces of pottery could be inscribed with ink and a reed, or just raw ink and a hollow stick. It was primitive, but it worked, and it stood the test of time. Judging by the fact that 80% of the shards are inscribed in a type of script called Demotic, archaeologists know they came from the Ptolemaic and Roman periods after 600 BC. What's truly amazing is that we can see how similar ancient Egyptians were to the people of today. Archaeologists have identified shopping lists of various foods and items people had to buy for daily use. They made calendars and marked important dates. They even used some of these scraps for grammar exercises, suggesting that kids were doing homework. Even over 2,000 years ago in Egypt, people were just people. They went grocery shopping, had family celebrations, and forced their kids to sit at a table and practice their alphabet. Ancient underground city. In central Turkey, a mysterious underground city was discovered by local shepherds completely by accident. These shepherds came across the entrance to the subterranean world, informed local authorities, and now the whole place is getting ready to open up to tourists. It's called the Belagasi Underground City and was dug into the side of a mountain by hand. It's the very first city of its kind found in the area that has over 50 individual rooms inside. Researcher Osman Odsoy says he believes it started as a small settlement of people living in underground caverns, but gradually grew as the population increased. More chambers were carved, more people started sheltering in the city, and it took on a life of its own. This region in Turkey is home to a lot of underground places. The ancient residents frequently carved hideouts into the sides of mountains in case of invasion, so they had somewhere to wait out the violence. But this city is different from the others in one main aspect. Whereas most of the underground settlements were built vertically, Belagasi was built horizontally. Those who created it carved it straight into the mountain, rather than going down in a complex series of tunnels. Researchers aren't sure why they did this, or really who even lived there. We don't even know exactly when the city was first carved, or when all the residents ultimately fled and left the place abandoned. Why do you think this city was created in such a unique way? Let me know your theories in the comments. And now for number 5, but first, it's shout-out time! Want to say a big thank you to Max Wanders and Different Sage. Thanks so much for watching and spending time with us. If you are new here, welcome, and be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. Destroyed by a comet. When archaeologists began analyzing rock samples from various archaeological sites in the Ohio River Valley, they made a weird discovery. It has to do with the Native American Hopewell culture, a people who enjoyed centuries of stability before a sharp and irreversible decline 1,500 years ago. For years, archaeologists have been trying to figure out what happened to the Hopewell culture. With these new rock samples, we may finally have an answer. Researchers with the University of Cincinnati believe an exploding comet may have been the final nail in the coffin for the Hopewell people. The rock samples they analyzed came from 11 different sites, and they all contain disintegrated fragments of a space object. These are known as micrometeorites. Considering how far apart the different sites are, it only makes sense that some kind of airburst caused debris to be distributed for miles in all directions. This would have been a major cosmic event, on par with a volcanic eruption. By radiocarbon dating the fragments, researchers were able to determine the catastrophic event happened sometime between 252 and 383 AD. This coincides perfectly with the downfall of the Hopewell culture. It's unclear what exactly happened, but the comet was almost certainly at fault. The explosion could have caused raging wildfires, destruction of agricultural lands, mass social confusion, and so much more. All of this resulted in a powerful civilization vanishing almost overnight. What do you think would happen if a similar cosmic catastrophe happened tomorrow? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Ancient sacrifices. Archaeologists recently discovered funerary bundles filled with the remains of children and adults at the entrance of a tomb in Peru. The ghoulish discovery was made at the Cajamarquilla Archaeological Complex, an ancient city that was once a great trading hub connecting the coastal communities of the Pacific coast with those living high up in the Andes Mountains. This city was extremely sophisticated, rich in commerce, and was abruptly abandoned because of climate change and natural disasters. Within the city is a great tomb, and at the entrance of the tomb is where these most recent bodies were found. The tomb was only designed for a single burial, for someone archaeologists have still been unable to identify. The bodies at the entrance were possibly his family members, including his wife and maybe children, along with his closest servants. Archaeologists believe they were all sacrificed around the year 800 to keep the mummified man inside the tomb company while he journeyed to the afterlife. An ancient mask. Archaeologists made yet another fascinating discovery recently in South America. This time they found a rectangular copper mask in Argentina, high up in the mountains. The mask is ancient, at least 3,000 years old. It also appears to be the oldest man-made metal object ever found on the continent. This is extraordinary for one main reason. Up until now, it was assumed metalworking originated in Peru, yet the oldest copper mask was found hundreds of miles away in Argentina. The mask was discovered at an ancient burial site that dates back to 1000 BC, but we don't really know what it was used for. Researchers did find hole marks, suggesting it may have been fastened to a person's face, but there's no way of really knowing. Even more interesting is that the copper ore used to fashion the mask came from within 45 miles. The ore was sourced and crafted locally, and that makes the pre-Incan society living in the mountains of Argentina the oldest metalworkers in South America. At least that's the way things are looking right now. It's true that gold objects have been found in Peru over 4,000 years old, but nothing that old made of copper. It could be that an unknown and very mysterious civilization in Argentina mastered metalwork, then traded with other pre-Incan societies in Peru, instead of those societies learning how to work metal themselves. It's all very confusing, and researchers are still trying to untangle all the threads. Dark Age stone. One of the most spectacular and mysterious recent discoveries came from Scotland. It was in early 2020 when archaeologists with the University of Aberdeen in Scotland participated in a survey of a farmer's field. That was when they came across a mysterious stone from the Dark Age, made by the Pictish people 1,500 years ago. Here's a quick history lesson. During the Dark Age in Scotland, the nation was ruled by a group of people called the Picts. The name translates roughly from Latin to English as the Painted Ones. They were called this because they painted their bodies with colorful dyes, making them look like savage barbarians to the Romans. They rose to power in the centuries following the fall of Rome, but disappeared from the history books around the ending of the first millennium. Aberlemno in Scotland is home to some of the best standing stones left behind by the Pictish people. They didn't make the best architecture, nor the biggest, most impressive cities. However, they did make some pretty cool works of art. It was in a field here where the archaeologists came across a stone carved with a mysterious Pictish symbol. The stone was taken from the field and brought to a lab for study, but archaeologists still don't know what exactly the symbol means. It may have been important, or it may have just been a doodle. It could have had something to do with a ritual, or it could be nothing at all. It's one of the best preserved Pictish symbols found carved onto a rock, making it a very unique discovery. Stonehenge, the solar calendar. In 2022, we received some new and interesting information about Stonehenge. This is already one of the most enigmatic places in the world, and it seems like every year it just gets a little more mysterious. Researchers now believe Stonehenge may have been used as a solar calendar. We already know that Stonehenge had something to do with astronomy, but until now, researchers mainly believed the megalith, which was built over 5,000 years ago, was used to mark solstices, meaning the beginning of summer and the beginning of winter. That's all changed. Researcher Timothy Darvill from Bournemouth University in the UK has suggested Stonehenge was a calendar for the full year. He believes each stone represents one of the 365 days in the year, with each section within the circle corresponding to weeks. This is a radical new theory that could change how we view Stonehenge. It wasn't a particular discovery that inspired the theory. It was based on observations made over the past few decades. Nobody actually knows how Stonehenge functioned with total certainty, but if Timothy is right, it would mean Stonehenge was a fully functioning calendar. It would mean that every aspect of Stonehenge was specifically designed for people to keep track of each day and each week, not only the major events like the winter solstice. What do you think? Are you surprised by this discovery? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon for more videos like these. Bye!